Welcome to Hopeful and Wholesome, the show where ambitious women come home to their bodies. I'm your host, Hope Pedraza, and I'm a functional practitioner, human design guide, and expert on all things energy, and your partner in decoding the language of your body. This is your space to reconnect with your body's wisdom, reclaim your energy, and rise into alignment in your health, your business, and your life. Because thriving isn't about pushing harder, it's about learning to listen deeper. So let's dive in because your next breakthrough starts right now. If you've ever wondered whether your emotional patterns, your childhood conditioning, or stress could be affecting your physical health, the answer is yes. In this episode of Beyond the Bloodwork, I'm going to show you how trauma and nervous system dysregulation and subconscious patterns can show up on your labs, and specifically the 3 labs that I run. And I'm going to talk about those. And how none of your symptoms are random, and none of them are wrong, and none of them are not connected, because it's all connected. And I think that's a lot of women come to me, I have all these random symptoms, but they're not random. The fact is that they're all very intelligent signals telling us that something is off. And so I want to dive into this and what the symptoms are really telling us. And I want to start with talking about survival patterns and how this drives your symptoms. So this is part 3 of a 5-part series I'm doing called Beyond the Bloodwork. So you can go back and listen to the first 2 if you want to catch up on those. But today, let's talk about how your survival patterns are driving your symptoms, how your stress and your trauma, your conditioning are driving your symptoms. A client of mine last year, at the end of last year, I feel like is a really good example of this. She had done all the right things. She had done elimination diets. She had done gut protocols. She was doing all the hormone balancing things, all the supplements, and she worked with other practitioners. And she even had a health, like a nutrition, some kind of nutrition certification herself. And so she knew things. It wasn't like she didn't know things, but she still felt her energy was crashing in the afternoon, like 2-3 o'clock, just completely crash. Her cycle was a little bit chaotic. Like it wasn't as regular as she knew it should be. Her mood was just kind of over the place with her cycle. And even when her cycle was regular in terms of time, the symptoms were never regular. It was just kind of all over the place. Her anxiety was, through the roof for the most part, for most of the month. And asking her to meditate or sit still was like just not going to happen without her completely spiraling. So what showed up for her, we did the labs. We did all 3 of the labs. The 3 labs that I run are a GI map, which is a really comprehensive gut test, a Dutch test, which is a really comprehensive hormone test. It's a dried urine test. You just pee on some paper. And then the HTMA, which I've talked about a gazillion times before. It's the hair, tissue, and mineral analysis, literally some hair that's measuring your cellular levels of minerals. So in her GI map, we saw high cortisol driven by inflammation. A lot of inflammatory markers showed up. We saw a lot of bacterial overgrowth from long-term stress. So there was some dysbiosis or just imbalances in her gut bacteria, good and bad gut bacteria. We saw her secretory IgA, which is an immunoglobulin. It's basically your gut's immune system. So this was a sign that her gut's immune system was burned out, could lead to other things. So we want to balance that out. In her Dutch test, her cortisol pattern was completely off, and she had this high cortisol at night, which your cortisol is supposed to be low at night. And you want cortisol to be low at night and high in the morning. It's our get up and go hormone. Massive estrogen dominance. So of course her weight wasn't going anywhere because she had her body just wasn't eliminating estrogen like she needed it to. And then on top of that, her progesterone was just barely there. Her HTMA, we saw, every possible marker you could look at for adrenal depletion. Like her adrenals were just hanging on by a thread. And then of course that calcium shell that I've talked about so many times, this wall of protection around her cells. So now her thyroid's not functioning optimally. Her neurotransmitters aren't functioning optimally. There's just a lot going on there. And so the last thing she needed was another supplement. And that's the thing. She's like, tried all the protocols, I've done the supplements. She needed to feel safe in her body. And we need to look at how the survival wiring was going on in her body, like what was causing these things to happen in the body. So I want to break down some of so how survival wiring shows up on your labs, what it looks like. So I want to break down a few different markers from the 3 labs that I do. So I want to start with the HTMA first, the hair tissue mineral analysis. So first of all, there's the sodium to potassium ratio. Sodium and potassium, this is talking about how your adrenals are operating, how your stress, how your body's coping with stress is what I'm trying to say. And so when this marker is low, We're looking at chronic stress, adrenal burnout, and emotional depletion. Like, period. I can look that alone and know that that's what's going on. If we're looking at a calcium shell, so basically anything over like, it's technically over 165, but I think anything over 150 be considered a calcium shell. This is tissue calcium. Remember, this is not the same thing as blood calcium. So with calcium shell, high calcium, you might experience suppressed emotions, emotional disconnection, trauma imprint, because as I've mentioned before in my episodes about the calcium shell, it could be from an acute traumatic situation, like this big T trauma caused this calcium shell. It could also be stress over time. And it could be a combination of both, because sometimes we have the big T traumatic thing, but then we have chronic stress out. So it could be a combination of both. But it's this trauma imprint. It's how trauma has imprinted on your cells, literally on your cells. And then we have an elevated copper and low zinc. This is looking at burnout in women because this is your hormone ratio. This typically tells me there's some sort of pattern of chronic overgiving. There's detox issues, perfectionism. And I know if there's detox issues, then we want to look at the solar plexus center in the body, and we're looking at your human design. Do you have a defined or an undefined solar plexus issue? Because that's affecting how your body's detoxing. Perfectionism, chronic overgiving is going to affect your hormonal balance 100% every single time. I can say that every single time. And that's a big one. And I see that a lot. So that's just from one lab. I can look at these patterns, this survival wiring in this one lab. So if I were to look at your Dutch test, what are some patterns there that show up, some markers there that would show up? So one of the things that a Dutch test measures is your cortisol pattern. So it's going to look at your cortisol levels, just overall levels, the different metabolites of your cortisol, and it's also going to look at your cortisol pattern. So how your cortisol is moving throughout the day. Now remember, cortisol is our get up and go hormone. So we want it to be higher in the morning and then lower at night. So lower at night so your melatonin can go up, your cortisol can go down. So if your cortisol is high at night, like I mentioned my client before, this is this hypervigilance. Can't shut it off. I can't turn it off. Wired but tired. I've said that word a lot, that phrase a lot, wired but tired. This is you're in this overachiever or like anxious achiever mode all the time. Hypervigilance all the time. I can't turn it off. I can't shut it off. I can't turn it off. High cortisol at night, it's going to show up. Low progesterone. Progesterone is kind of this one of your calming hormones. And so your body, if it's low, your body doesn't feel safe enough to ovulate or rest. So you're probably not ovulating if your progesterone is low enough. Or if you are, then rest is a hard thing for you. And that your low progesterone is going to impact that. And then estrogen dominance. And all of these were what I saw in this client that I mentioned before on her labs. Estrogen dominance, poor detox because your body's not eliminating it like I need to. Emotional stagnation. And then this is a sign that you're wired for productivity, right? Especially when you have together the low progesterone and the estrogen dominance. Man, that's like double whammy recipe for I can't turn it off. I can't slow down. I can't stop. My body doesn't feel safe to do any of that. And you are going to have poor detox. Because if you have poor detox and emotional stagnation really go together, because as I mentioned a second ago, your solar plexus is your emotional center, and it impacts your body's ability to be able to detox. And your emotional health, your emotional stability, all of that is going to affect your body's ability to detox. It's all coming from the same center. So that's the Dutch test. And then the last one, some markers on your GI map. This is the gut test. She had low secretory IgA, which is that sign of immunity. So suppressed immunity. If you have if you have suppressed immunity, you are in constant chronic fight or flight. That's it. So if your gut immune system is low, this is a sign to me that you're in chronic fight or flight. H. pylori is another really common one. H. pylori is an upper GI bacteria that lives upper GI, meaning it lives in your stomach. And I'm going to put these two together. Candida, which is an overgrowth of yeast, basically in the body. Candida or H. pylori, if either of these are overgrown, this is an indication to me that there is some sort of trauma. This could be big T, little t trauma, but your trauma lives in the gut, really. Let's be honest. Trauma lives in the gut lining. That gut-brain connection, this is a real thing. And so the H. pylori and the Candida, we need to work on this part. The last one I want to mention, there's a specific marker called beta-glucuronidase, and this is a measure of basically how your hormones, specifically estrogen, is being reabsorbed back in the body. So if this marker is elevated, then this means that you have hormones being reabsorbed due to poor detox. And this means that there is some emotional things that are stuck in the body that are ready to be released. They need to be released. This is what's happening. These signs of elevated estrogen, like estrogen dominance, and these markers like this one I'm talking about, that is a measure of hormones being reabsorbed back in the body. If you are detoxing poorly, we have emotional things we need to address, period. These things are always connected. So as I said, when I first started this, none of these are random. None of these symptoms and none of her symptoms are random. None of your symptoms are random. And when you know how, or you have someone who knows how to look at the labs through this lens. So we're looking at the labs obviously through a functional lens, looking at what function in the body, but we're also looking at how this correlates to your survival patterns, right? This is a mirror of your lived experience. It doesn't just have to be labs where it's just what's going on in your blood, what's going on in your poop, what's going on. It is a mirror of your lived experience. And I really think that this is the difference. And I don't want to get too far ahead of myself because in my last episode, I'll talk about kind of this new paradigm. But to me, this is the new paradigm of healing. It's stepping away from just looking at the labs as at face value and looking at a human as a set of labs and really diving into how this is a mirror of their lived experience, because that's where the healing is when we can put these pieces together. So I want to do this exercise with you real quick, kind of taking an emotional inventory, because I want you to think about this. Because if you've been kind of doing these little exercises in the other couple other episodes, then I feel like you can get more out of this. If you were to say these words out loud, I trust my body. That's it. If you were to say them out loud, maybe you say it in your head if you're sitting in your car or something. I trust my body. Where do you feel resistance? Where do you feel resistance? First of all, do you believe it when you say it? I trust my body. Do you believe that statement? That's a first big clue. And then if the answer is no, then where do you feel resistance? This is a part of you that's still holding on to control as a survival strategy. And she's just trying to keep you safe. Right? Because I said in the last episode, any symptom that's happening, it's just to keep you safe. It's not trying to sabotage you. But if we can bring that forth to your conscious mind, now we can respect that part of you and honor that part of you. But I think we can also say, okay, you don't need to run the show anymore, because once it becomes conscious, we can make a change. So once where you feel the resistance, if you feel when you say the words, I trust my body, and you feel like this does not feel resonant for me, and you can tune into where you're feeling the resistance, we can start identifying some things of where their survival strategies are. And that's when we can start. Once things become conscious, and we can heal it. I want to remind you here that if you go to the show notes below and you can take the energy leak locator quiz, because this is going to you can go even deeper into what I'm talking about here, this deeper breakdown of how trauma can show up on your labs, where the energy leaks are, and start seeing how your story is written into your body and how to rewrite it, because you will get a little map of how to patch the leaks. But this is it. It's about understanding what's written in your body right now. And now we can do something to change it. Remember, your body's not sabotaging you. Your body doesn't hate you. I always hate that terminology, especially when we're talking about autoimmune diseases and we're like, oh, your body's attacking itself. I mean, yes, technically we could say that, but your body doesn't want to attack yourself. That's not the point. Your body's just trying to keep you safe. And so if we can bring that perspective with us, this opens up a whole other world of. So I think one of the most common things that women come to me with, what they say, energy is always the big one. But most of the time, they're just like talking about their hormones. Just fix my hormones. Just fix my hormones. And that's fine. I would love to fix your hormones. But your hormones are never the problem. You don't have a hormone problem. Even though we all think we have a hormone problem. The fact is that you have a communication problem between your subconscious and your cells. That's the problem. And I'd say that for any symptom, right? It's this communication between your subconscious and your cells and how your physical body's operating. My clients who come to me and they're, tell me all the hormonal issues with their period or lack thereof, or it's all over the place. Crazy perimenopause symptoms. I've worked with plenty of menopausal women and postmenopausal women, and there's a lot of hormone stuff there. It's, whether they have PCOS or they've had cysts before, they've had endometriosis, they have, the mood swings are crazy, and they've done all the tracking for their cycle, so they know like this crazy thing happens at this part of my cycle and this crazy thing happens on this part of my cycle. And these are women that aren't, they're taking care of themselves. They've got the sleep routine down. They've worked on their diet. Some of them have eliminated certain things they know trigger them. So it's not like they're not doing anything, but they're telling me all about their hormones. And there's so much that we find out when we do the labs, because then I tell them this, when I'm able to explain to them, like, yeah, your hormones are doing all these things, but it's all of these other things down the chain that are actually affecting it. And so we find a lot of times I found like their minerals, for example, on their HTMA, a 4 lows pattern, which means like you are completely depleted in all of the major minerals. Your body is in a full-on freeze, like your body's in shutdown mode. So of course you're feeling all these things in your hormones because you have no minerals, like you're completely depleted. Things show up on their GI map where, they're not digesting fat or protein optimally. They have poor enzyme levels, like their pancreas isn't making a lot of enzymes to help with digestion. So of course you're bloated all the time. Of course, you can't lose weight and your estrogen is through the roof because your digestion is slow. You're not pooping regularly, so you're not eliminating things. You're not detoxing optimally. And it's because your nervous system is in this conservation mode, essentially, right? So of course things are going to slow down. And of course your thyroid is running slow and your metabolism is slow and you don't have energy and your hair is falling out and your thyroid is like, what? Like, of course things are going on. And so the point is that yes, we can talk about how our hormones are doing this, that, and whatever. We can talk about our cortisol levels. We can talk about all of these things, but it's about connecting the dots, and we have to go deeper down the chain of not just looking at things at surface level. Because yes, we can look at your cortisol dysregulation on your Dutch test, and we can look at your hormone imbalance. These are a sign of chronic stress. Right? We can look at your low mineral output and the fact that you barely have any minerals showing up on your HTMA. This is a sign your nervous system is in a complete freeze response. We can look at your GI map and look at how your the balance of good and bad bacteria. We can look at your gut's immunity. We can look at your enzyme output. All that's great. That's great. But this is a sign that there is some sort of detox issue going on. There's a reason your digestive system has slowed down. Your nervous system is telling it to slow down. All of this goes back to how your nervous system, how your body's operating. The protective patterns that I see so often, high cortisol, low progesterone, is this overworking in this fixing mode, always fixing, always doing, always achieving, right? There's low zinc and high copper. This is the perfectionist pattern. I've always got to do things perfect. There's the high calcium, the calcium shelf that I've talked about a handful of times now. There's this numbness, this disconnection, the gut issues. We've got unprocessed trauma. We've got something that's causing the nervous system to react in a certain way. So all of these markers the markers that I'm looking at on the labs are not just the markers. I think that's the point I want to get across here. I'm not just looking at what is your cortisol level? What is your estrogen level? What is your estrogen, progesterone? Like, it's not just looking at the levels at face value. And even with the minerals, it's not just looking at it at face value. None of these labs are going to do you any good just looking at them at face value. Yes, I want the empirical data. Yes, I want to know the levels of all of these things and know exactly what's going on in your body so I don't have to guess. That's the main thing. I don't want to have to guess. I want to be able to tell you this is exactly what's going on in your body. But then we ask the most important question, which is, but why? And such a simple question that so many practitioners and physicians and all they don't ask. It's such a simple question, but it requires a lot more deep dive into your body, your emotional history, your all that kind of stuff, your life experience. It requires a deeper dive into your actual labs and connecting dots and finding patterns. And it just requires more from you as the patient or the client, more from the practitioner of deep diving and really looking into these different aspects of you, right? So my point is, this is the question that we're not asking, and why so many of us get stuck in this. I've done it all and nothing's helping. I've tried it all and nothing's helping. I've been to their practitioners and nobody's been able. This is why we get stuck in these patterns. We're not asking enough why. We're not going deep enough with the why. And when I'm looking at all of these markers on the labs, there's multiple levels of why, multiple layers of why I want to ask with all of these. And then I start to put it together with all of these survival patterns, right? So it's not just looking at the important thing here is to remember that your body is listening to every belief that you hold, especially the subconscious ones, the unconscious ones. And this belief, this programming, this is what is affecting your body at a physical level. I've said it before and I'll say it a million times over. I do believe that every physical symptom that's happening on the body has an energetic emotional root cause. And sometimes this can take years or even decades to show up. Sometimes it's more immediate, but the physical symptoms on the body always start with some sort of energetic friction, right? There's a connection there. And so the beliefs, the thought patterns, all of that, your body is listening to those. Your physical body is listening to all of those. So the perfectionism, the overworking, all of those things that I was just talking about, the stress, the chronic stress, all of these, there are beliefs happening in your body that are perpetuating these cycles. Right? The control, the perfectionism, the overworking, the overachieving, the overproducing, the overgiving, all of those things. There are patterns, beliefs in your subconscious that are causing you to act that way, to follow that. And that's what's affecting your physical body. And so the big question is, for you, why does it feel unsafe to believe the opposite, right? So if control is a big thing, or perfectionism, right? What is like there's parts to untangle there. And that's really the starting point. Because if your subconscious is wired a certain way and wired in a way to believe that achieving equals safety, productivity equals safety, doing equals safety, then rest is always going to feel like a threat. Your nervous system is never going to be calm enough to let your body heal. Because remember, it is physiologically impossible for your body to heal when you're in fight, flight, or freeze. Physiologically impossible. You have to be in that rest and digest state, or that kind of in between. It is physiologically impossible. So rest is always going to feel like a threat if we are wired to believe that. And so I ask you to ask yourself that, right? Where does it feel unsafe to not overachieve, overproduce, be productive, blah, 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 that list that I just said? And where in my life have I made productivity or achieving the price of my worth? Because if you go back, I have a whole series about how we tied work to our productivity and how that affects, it was the last series I did actually, how that affects our physical, emotional, mental body. And this is a piece of it too. And it's not always about, I think productivity shows up in different packaging, right? Sometimes we don't say it's productivity, but that's really what it is. The output, the achieving, the succeeding, like all of that. It's all the same category to me. And these are the patterns that we're rewiring. And these are the patterns that I'm helping my clients rewire inside the work that we do together. Because yes, we're going to look at the labs, we're going to look at it. But as I said, I am the one that's going to ask those deeper levels and deeper layers of why that others aren't asking, because that's how we get to the bottom of it. That's how we really are able to untangle the patterns. And that's how we're able to actually heal. And as I said in the last episode, it's all about how do you put more life into your life? And this is how we do it, untangling these pieces so that we can bring back that life force energy in the body, so you can have that vitality and that clarity again in your business, in your work, in your relationships, and in your health, all of the things. It's bringing more life to your life. And it starts here with untangling these pieces. So the last part I want to leave you here is really kind of rewiring or reframing our relationship or our perception of symptoms, quote unquote symptoms. Because I think the big thing here, and actually I mentioned this a second ago, but I think people often think that the symptoms are like when the issue started, that's like the beginning of the issue, and that is just not the case. This is actually the conclusion of everything that came before that. When I was doing my Reiki training, she was talking about that and how some studies show that it's like up to 7 years or 7 to 10 years or something before a trauma, depending on like the type of trauma, shows up on the physical body. So the fact is that your symptoms are not the beginning of the issue. And that's the problem, is that when the symptoms aren't bad enough or severe enough, so while we brush them off and we're like, oh, it's fine. But we think like, oh yeah, they just started. But well, no, this is the conclusion of everything that came before that. And so I think about my own journey with this, and this is what it brings to mind, because this is what it was for me. I had gone years of, little things I had pushed aside. This, there was hyper independence, there was overachieving, perfectionism, all these things. My worth was 100% completely tied to my output, my productivity, which is why I did that other series before. And there were plenty of signs. For me, it's like, oh yeah, these symptoms just started coming up, but they hadn't. They hadn't. It was everything before that. It was the years of disordered eating behavior that I had. It was the years of perfectionism and overachieving and like OCD exercise and all of that. So when I did the labs myself, like my GI map showed all kinds of stuff, all kinds of stuff. There was, I had the H. pylori, I had the dysbiosis, I had low enzymes, I had my gut immune system was low. Like there was all kinds of stuff. I didn't do the Dutch test at the time. I was doing it's this similar test. It was still for your sex and steroid hormones. It was a different one. But that test, that was the biggest one for me because it showed my adrenals were like hanging on for dear life. My cortisol pattern was like all over the place. My minerals, I had all the high stress patterns. I had it was very clear. It was very clear what my body had been telling me and what I had been like shutting up. So it was, and yes, there's a part of healing those things. I did the work I did a gut protocol. I did the mineral protocol. I did all the things, but it was really about healing that pattern of overachieving, overworking, tying that all to my productivity, the over responsibility, all of these things. That was really the true healing, because that was when, my digestion started to calm down, right? I wasn't having all the IBS flares that I was having. My cycle, that was a really big one, just completely regulating my cycle and didn't have the horrible, debilitating cramps and everything else I'd have for so long. The energy was more sustainable, and it wasn't from fixing it. I think that's the big thing I want to bring forward here. It's not from fixing it. It was from feeling it, right? It was healing the patterns. It was feeling. You got to feel to heal it. That as you have to feel it, have to feel that, recognize all of these, bring to the conscious those unconscious patterns. That was what it was about. Yes, the physical parts, it's all part of it. It all plays a part in it, but you can't out supplement a jacked up nervous system. You can't out supplement these patterns that are so hardwired in our brains that they've been programming us for 30, 40, 50, maybe even more years of your life. Like you can't out supplement that. So the body is the last place that your soul speaks to when it's been ignored. So we see it as like the enemy or the villain, but it's just the voice, right? The body is the last place. So that's why I say you have these energetic, emotional things going on in the body. Your physical body is the last place that it's gonna come out. That's typically when we start doing something about it, unless we are able to do, a lot of the inner work to pull for these patterns, and you can recognize like, oh yeah, this is where I've been programming, and I can reprogram this now. Your symptoms are the signal. Right? The labs is kind of the language, right? So we can understand what's going on. And your subconscious, this is the program running the show. And we have to put all of these pieces together. So we can look at the labs to understand it. And then the subconscious part is how we want to reprogram, because that is the programming that's running the show. Here's a question I want to leave you with in this episode. If your body could speak in one sentence, if it could say one sentence, what would it say? Would she say, please stop making me prove my worth? Would she say, please just slow down? Would she say, I've been waiting for you to come home? Would she say, I really don't hate you. I'm just protecting you? Would she say, girl, I can't keep going like this anymore? Would she say, I have so much more available for you that you just don't even know, right? What would your body say to you if she could speak one sentence to you right now? And I want you to let that message that your body, and sit with this, go get into a quiet space, journal on it, meditate on it, whatever, but let that message guide your next choice. And this is so simple. This does not have to be hard. This does not have to be complicated. But if you allow yourself to get into a space where you can listen to what your body wants to say right now in one sentence, that message, should you take action on it, could change the rest of your friggin' life. And this is not dramatic because I have had this happen before with clients time after time after time. One little message that they decided to act on, they decided to reach out to me. I've had clients who have messaged me from one post they saw on Instagram and immediately spent multiple 4 figures in a program with me because they were like, they made the choice and they listened. They were like, I'm doing it. That's the certainty that you can have if you listen to the messages your body is sending you and let that guide your choices. That's the power that you have within you. It doesn't have to be this long, drawn-out decision-making process. It gets to be quick and easy if you listen and ask your body what it needs. And if your body's asking for support, maybe a different kind of support, different level of support, that's it. So I ask you to contemplate that. Sit on it, marinate on it for a while. I have all the links below. I have the links to the Energy Leak Locator quiz below. You can DM me minerals if you want to talk about the HTMA test package. If you're wanting that deep transformation with your data, your design, all the deep transformational stuff, this is what happens in the Quantum Reset. Just message me reset, or I'll put the link below if you want to schedule a time to chat. The Quantum Reset is the ultimate place for that deep transformational deep transformational healing, to get that, reclaim that energy and that clarity and that inner peace and that feeling of love in your body, the freedom in your body that you've been looking for, and to bring more life into your life. That's what it's all about. Can you get more life out of life? I want to help you do that. So click link below. I'm going to see you in the next episode of the series.